I think we just activated the mics. Are they working? Is mic? Should be. Well, let's get started. First of all, I'm Raymond Paredes, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming at this particular time of year when the weather in Austin has been pretty lousy for the past couple of days. Let me just make a couple of very quick remarks, and then we'll introduce, make sure everybody knows everybody, and then we'll get going with the agenda. As all of you know, the coordinating board adopted college readiness standards at its winter meeting last year. And after that, according to House Bill 1, in conformity, I should say, with House Bill 1, they went to Robert Scott, the Commissioner of Education, and he approved the college readiness standards. And now TEA and the coordinating board are working on ways to implement the standards. The State Board of Education obviously is centrally involved. And one of the things that's occurred to me as we've talked about the college readiness standards and how critical they are to the future of Texas is that we're going to need a lot of very, very good teachers to implement those standards. And so one of the things that we talked about here at the coordinating board is how important it would be to attract high-achieving students into the teaching profession, how to prepare them so that they can teach at high levels of rigor, and how we can prepare them so that they will be successful in whatever schools are assigned to once they go into the profession. I know that all of you work on these issues all the time, and we're very appreciative of the work that you're doing. But all of you know at the same time that we are running far short of our goals in terms of attracting enough new, highly trained, highly qualified teachers, particularly in math and science, into the profession. We have T-STEM academies in the state that can't find the teachers they need. The governor, as all of you know, has launched his cancer initiative. And I'm thinking, where are we going to get the people that can work effectively in that field? That field that all of us, I know, would have a personal commitment to, because we're all touched by the ravages of cancer. Where are we going to get the highly trained people to work effectively in this area without dealing with the fundamental question of highly effective teachers in particularly high schools? We need them up and down the pipeline, including higher education, but we particularly need them in secondary schools. And so I thought that the coordinating board ought to be very directly involved in all the different initiatives that are going on around the state, that you have going on your own campuses, and see if there's some way, there's a scalability factor, there's a sharing best practices factor. There is some convening role that the coordinating board might be able to play in trying to get all these activities aligned and moving effectively forward towards achieving our common goal of more effective teachers in our schools. We've had some wonderful ideas that all of you know about. There's been the University of Texas here in Austin has had a good deal of success with You Teach. We've had some wonderful conversations over the past, what is it, Bill, 2 years that we've had conversations among educational leaders in Texas about teacher effectiveness and how to improve the process by which we produce teachers and retain effective teachers in the classroom. There's some good ideas that have come out of those discussions. And as I said, I know a lot of you have been working on these issues independent of the two processes that I just mentioned. So I thought there might be some benefit to bringing all of you together and seeing if we could figure out a way to do this in partnership and coordinate our efforts effectively for all the youngsters in Texas. One issue, I see that Amy Barbie from the Texas Cultural Trust and some of her colleagues are here. Amy, if it's okay with you, we might just move the agenda around. Are you prepared to? We are, but. Okay. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. There was one other issue that we placed on the agenda, which I thought would be of interest to all of you as well, and that is how we can integrate arts education into the preparation of teachers. As all of you know, we train arts educators independently, but you also know that when budgetary times get tough in our K through 12 school districts, arts education is often one of the first things that gets cut, and so there's a sustainability issue. And I've had some history of working in the area of arts education, and it's always been my view that the best way to preserve arts education is to integrate it into the overall curriculum. So I thought we could have some discussion about that issue as well. If it's okay with this group, I would prefer, rather than interrupt our discussion about teacher preparation in general, I would like to rearrange the agenda so that we talk about arts education initially, and then spend the last part of our meeting, the bulk of the meeting, talking about the issue that I just mentioned. So if that's okay, why don't we just proceed that way? Why don't we begin by, I know that most of you know everybody, but not everybody knows everybody, so let's introduce ourselves. We'll start over here with Dick.
Hi, I'm Dick Dacey. I'm a visitor from out of town, and for many years I've directed the National Arts Education Partnership, which is 140 national organizations, including AACTE among them. And so I'm here actually for another meeting, and the commissioner was kind enough to have me join and represent a committee that's been going on. So that's who I am.
And I'm Amy Barbie. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Cultural Trust, and we are a 501c3 organization whose mission is to highlight and promote the importance of the arts in educating our children and for our economy. We're a statewide organization.
I'm Val Wilkie, Executive Vice President, Sid Richard Foundation. Some of you know me. We've been involved in this field for some time and are still happily trying to make the best of teaching and learning in our schools.
Go ahead. I'm Jim McConnell, the incoming Dean of College of Education, Concordia, Texas.
I'm John Miaska. I'm the Dean of the College of Education at Angelo State University in San Angelo, Texas.
I'm Ted Guffey, the Interim Dean of the College of Education at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi.
Brent Mangus, the Dean of College of Education and Human Services at Texas A&M Commerce.
Karen Genling, Dean of the School of Education, St. Edward's University.
Doug Palmer, I'm the Dean of the College of Education and Human Development at Texas A&M University College.
I'm Viola Garcia, Assistant Chair for the Department of Urban Education at the University of Houston Downtown. I'm here for Beth Peltz, Dean of the College of Public Service.
I'm Jill Burke, Dean of the College of Education at Tarleton State University.
I'm Glenda Ballard. I'm Interim Dean of the College of Arts, Sciences, and Education at Texas A&M University, Texarkana.
Berto Gonzalez, Dean of the College of Education, Texas A&M International.
I'm Lucian Yates III, and I have the privilege of serving as the Dean at the Whitlow R. Green College of Education at Prairie View A&M University.
I'm Marilyn Bartlett. I'm the new Dean of the College of Education at Texas A&M University in Kingsville.
I'm Ed Mills. I'm the Associate Provost and Dean of Education, University of Texas, Permian Basin.
I'm Eddie Henderson, Dean of the College of Education and Social Sciences at West Texas A&M University.
I'm Dana Hood, Chair of Teacher Education at Abilene Christian University, here for the Dean, Dr. Breeding, of the College of Education and Human Services.
I'm Jane Owen, Department Chair of Educational Leadership and Technology at Midwestern State University. I'm filling in for Grant Simpson today.
I'm Pam Williford. I'm the Dean of School of Education at Hardin-Simmons University in Abilene, Texas.
Hi, Hollis Lowry Moore. I'm Dean of the College of Education and Human Development at Lamar University.
I'm Bob Wimpelberg, Dean of the College of Education at University of Houston.
And I'm John Engelhardt. I'm Dean of the School of Education at Baylor University in Waco.
And I'm Judith Loredo. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for P16 Initiatives, and I spent 22 years in your all's chair when I was at Houston Tillotson University. I also did want to say that there are some of your colleagues who could not make it today, so to be able to accommodate them, we are on a broadcast via the Internet. Even though we're going to be speaking at this end, if you all would like to send an email and have a question that you might want answered, if you would send it to Linda, Linda, Battles, Battles, at THECB like in boy, .state.tx.us. This way they can also communicate. We wanted to make sure that we could tap into everyone who might not have had the chance to come in, so we're just delighted that you all are here. I also, if I could take the privilege, Commissioner, to introduce Dr. Susan Barnes, who is in the back, who should be
Susan,
up here
why
at
don't
the
you
table.
come up here to the table,
Susan.
please.
Trying to leave space for all the deans to be here. If all the deans are up there who need to be up there.
There are more there. I see them.
So we can squeeze chairs in.
Okay, no line low. We need you all up here.
And there's some more chairs right there. Dr. Susan Barnes is the Senior Director in the Division of P16 Initiatives that oversees educator quality. That's why I wanted to recognize her. Also, Araceli Ortiz, who is right here to the back, is also a director within that unit and has worked very closely with Dr. Barnes in her last months. And the Deputy Assistant Commissioner is to the back, also Evie Hyatt in that unit. And I think that's all of the staff that's in here, so I wanted them also to be recognized. Thank you, Commissioner.
I'm David Gardner, Deputy Commissioner for Academic Planning and Policy, and I was hoping to lay low. I guess I should note that I used to play softball with Doug Palmer.
We were both 2 at the time. Yeah.
Just about. I think I was 3 and you were 2.
Well, once again, welcome to all of you, and thank you for coming. And I see some good friends and colleagues among you, and so I'm looking forward to working with you even more closely than before. Okay, well, without further ado, let's get into the presentation. I should be truthful up front. I am a trustee of the Texas Cultural Trust, so I have a vested interest, a personal interest in arts education, but I'm sure you won't hold that against me. So, Dick, if you...
I think...
Okay.
Or Amy?
Okay, well, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. Once Dr. Paredes said we would have this time on your agenda, we got a group of leaders in arts education from across the state. I didn't see this in your packet, so I just want to very briefly tell you who's been involved in putting this presentation together. Is Chris Andrews, Center for Education Development in the Fine Arts, Gigi Antoni, Big Thought, Jose Antonio Bowen, Dean of the Meadows School of Arts at Southern Methodist University, Jack Davis, Director of the North Texas Institute for Educators on the Visual Arts, University of North Texas, Doug Dempster, Dean, College of Fine Arts, University of Texas at Austin, Robert Floyd, Executive Director, Texas Music Educators Association, Gary Gibbs, Director, Texas Commission on the Arts, Brent Hasty, who's a consultant to Big Thought and has a PhD in Curriculum Studies, Janice Killian, Chair of Music Education, School of Music, Texas Tech University. So we brought together a group of people to figure out how we come talk to you about how important the arts are, especially as we're educating our children in this 21st century that has changed and is rapidly changing before our eyes. And to a person, we all decided that Dick Deasy was the right person to come and present this argument. And I have the honor of being able to introduce Dick to you. Those of you that do not know Dick, he is the founding director of the Arts Education Partnership, which is a coalition of over 100 education, arts, business, philanthropic, and government organizations. And under his tutelage, he commissioned and edited widely acclaimed Critical Links, Learning in the Arts and Student Academic and Social Development, and Third Space, When Learning Matters. In 2008, the National Endowment for the Arts, the U.S. Department of Education, the Council of Chief State School Officers, and the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies created in his honor the Richard J. Deasy Award for Partnership in Education in the Arts. And that, to me, says a lot for those groups to come together to honor this man that is before you today. In addition, he also received the NEA Chairman's Award for Distinguished Service to the American public. He is probably one of the preeminent scholars on arts education in the United States today, and we are very lucky to have him here to present to you.
Well, thanks. I wrote that. And my children can tell you it's not the least bit true. Great to be here. I'm fond of this state. I have a sister who's lived here for 50 years in Corpus Christi, and so it's great to visit. I'll try and be very quick in honor of your agenda. I was going to use a PowerPoint, but I don't know whether you can even see it over there, and so I will see. Oh, you have it there, too? What I was asked to do by this committee that was put together, they've been actually discussing, no doubt on your campuses as well as among themselves, how undergraduate preparation of teachers could capitalize on what we've come to understand about the potential of the arts to improve teaching, not just in the art forms, but across the forms. And they wanted to offer you 3 or 4 possible suggestions about collaboration on campus with the arts and arts education staff. And they've asked me to mention those recommendations, but they wanted me to preface them, if I would, for those who are not familiar, with a quick look at what we've learned over the past, I would say, 20 years in cognitive science and now marginally neuroscience, and our own work on what are the intellectual processes engaged in when a young person learns an art form, and what is the significance of that development in the young person that can be meaningfully tapped into as the student is learning other materials in schools. And so what I'd like to do, and are you familiar with the book by Daniel Pink, A Whole New Mind?
Yes.
Well, Dan and I have been doing a couple of things together, and he has this thing where he says, if you could do a PowerPoint where you only spend 10 seconds on each PowerPoint, this is a major achievement. Mm-hmm. So I will try and zip through these, but if you have them in front of you, what I might want to see if this machine can work from here. What do you think? So let's just...
we can get somebody who can run it from...
No, it'll slow us down. Okay. Why don't I just work from the papers you have in front of you? Does that work for you? I don't do good PowerPoints anyway. If you look at them, here am I, a guy talking about arts, and I do PowerPoints like that, and it's embarrassing. I have a granddaughter who does them better than I. I wanted to repeat who the partnership was, just for your benefit. We were founded 13 years ago by the U.S. Department of Education and by the National Endowment for the Arts. And it brought together the 50 state arts education agencies and the 50 state arts agencies. And then we have 140. In your ranks, AACTE from the very beginning was active with us, as a number of the higher education organizations were. All of the education associations, teachers' unions, school boards, and every national arts organization, but a bunch of philanthropies as well. And frankly, I want to say the American Educational Research Association. So all of the work that we've done over the past number of years had to go through a baptism of fire, peer review panels and so on. So what I want to talk to you about just briefly is to tease out some of the findings from that. If you look at your materials there, you'll see little pictures of some of the work. what we were examining was the obvious thing that happens when young people are involved in the arts is this is a breakthrough in research. They learn the arts. That is to say, that's an aha finding. That is, the primary purpose is that they become capable and appreciative of art forms. What we were interested in is what are the underlying cognitive, personal, and social dynamics? What are those capacities that, in fact, are nurtured and demanded when you're doing an art form? And I wanted to just share with you a few that emerged, and I'm particularly drawing on from the book called Critical Links, Learning in the Arts and Student Social and Academic Development. That's a piece of work that we did about 7 or 8 years ago. I commissioned Harvard and UCLA scholars there to do peer review initially of studies that looked at the effects, and there were 62 of them, and then we did 15 different peer review processes on them. And I wanted to tease out a couple of the findings from that, and that's the what is going on cognitively. And a couple of them I'll dwell on for you. One of the things we're aware of in the arts is, and Ernie Boyer said this many years ago, you may recall, that every art is a symbolic system. Language is a symbolic system. And we know from early childhood research that the more symbol systems you're involved in, the better you are at all of them. The arts are a mode of apprehending knowledge and expressing knowledge, and to do that, you've got to work in the symbolic world. Therefore, one of the intense aspects of arts is a better ability to communicate and to be expressive in a communicative way in language, in any form of language, and also in the art forms such as they are. So symbolic capacities and interpretation are at the root of it. I noticed, by the way, that somebody's flashing these up now. The second one that is always surprising to people is what the psychologists call conditional reasoning. That's theorizing. That's what you do in science. But it's clearly a capacity that is nurtured and demanded. These are things that you will not become any good at the arts if you can't do these things. So symbolic communication, conditional reasoning, theorizing, and of course the act of the imagination, which is the capacity to see things that aren't there. That is, to envision new capacities and possibilities for human behavior. I want to dwell on that just very briefly because it's an underappreciated fundamental capacity that neuroscience is discovering is a fundamental capacity. It's what enables you to be creative. It's what enables you to be innovative, that capacity, which is the cognitive capacity. So we were exploring that. And recently we did some public opinion polling, voter polling that we shared with all the campaigns. The American people think that's the fundamental skill that should be taught in schools, imagination. But I wanted to point out a couple of the others, which I think are germane to the challenges that are facing us in K-12 education, which were just cited a moment ago. And you're facing them, we're all facing them. It has to do with the populations of the students, dropout rates, language barriers, other kinds of issues that we're grappling with. One of the things we've been discovering is that the impact that the arts have by developing these capacities, they offer those who face barriers to learning in schools and have a potential to drop out of schools are re-engaged. And the next one there, they actually like to learn. They become deeply engaged in learning, and they develop what you know is called achievement motivation. That is, the desire to work and adjust behaviors towards success, which a lot of kids don't have. And you've got to try and nurture that. We've all got to try and nurture it. How do you get them motivated to learn things they don't really care much about learning? And dropout rates are related to a lack of achievement motivation, a lack of engagement. Well, one of the things that we know from cognitive science, and we've done a lot of work with John Bransford, if you know Bransford's How People Learn, that series of books he did for the Academy on how people learn brain, mind, research, practice, and in his next one, how people learn brain, research to practice, how people learn science, which is a team of researchers from the Academy that I think are the Bible for cognitive science. We've tried to situate our work in that. One of the things we've discovered and comes out of that work is that you only learn what matters to you. So the concept of mattering, the educational psychology term mattering, what we've discovered in the arts that leads to some of these others is making an art form matters because it's an act of the child. It's an act of the person. It's not mastering something that they're being asked to master by other people. It's actually such a deep, profound communication about who they are that it is instantly relevant because they are making something that only they could make. Every act of art by anybody is an original act of work. It's original. And your version of it, you might be imitating a Van Gogh, you might be imitating a Stravinsky, but yours is yours. And so that mattering capacity leads to engagement and leads to the deep achievement motivation and the desire to succeed, and it frankly leads kids to hang around schools. The other thing that comes out of that, which is immensely important, is you become persistent and resilient, if you know the work of Shirley Bryce Heath on that. And one of the problems that we have in schools with teachers and with kids is resilience. The frustrations of being in climates where you're not in control lead you to give up. Or as friends of mine in the arts say, you don't get through the pain threshold of trying to learn something. But schools are frustrating places because they are rule-bounded. You're not free to move around the world. And so you need resilience and you need persistence. And if any of you have tried to learn to play the piano, learn to paint, learn to do PowerPoints, the great barrier to overcome is the pain threshold. You need persistence, and the more persistent you become as a human being, you develop the capacity to be resilient so you can deal with frustration. And so the arts, because they engage people in something that really matters to them, and I embrace poetry, literature, art form. We were talking this morning with the electronic arts people in terms of, those forms of graphic art. We are talking about the broad range of those human capacities. I talk about culinary arts sometimes. So we are not limiting this to ballet. We are limiting it to those things of creating aesthetically meaningful objects that meet the canons of quality of the aesthetic that you're working at. And that can be a wide range of things that we do in schools. What persistence and resilience and these factors lead to is extremely important. And the other thing that most arts involve is a collaborative learning experience. Music certainly, dance certainly, theater certainly, and certain kinds of visual arts. Keith Sawyer, the great scholar on creativity out of the University of Washington, St. Louis, really argues that there's no such thing as individual creativity. All creativity is collaborative. Whether you're standing in a room thinking by yourself, you're inheriting the traditions of your thought processes through other people. So all learning is a collaborative. And the more you make collaboration visible and articulate by doing it actually together physically, the greater the impact on you. And deep understanding usually results from a collaborative undertaking that is meaningful and relevant. The Gates people, for a while, you may recall, were using rigorous, relevant, and relational as their criteria for, and I like that. The other couple things I put down here for you in the social category, we know, and this comes up extensively if you look at children's involvement in theater and drama. It builds social tolerance and empathy. Or as Catterall called it one day, we were talking about it, he said, remember, all drama is moral ambiguity. All drama is built on moral ambiguity. And so when you're involved in those kinds of morally ambiguous productions, when you're performing and working together, you build social tolerance. And one of the great studies was a meta-analysis of most of the studies of theater with populations, we've done some of them ourselves, where the populations are, in other countries were, a school we studied where the Iraqi and Iranian populations were prominent. Theater and drama create a possibility of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and develop empathy. Well, I could go on about that, but what I wanted to say was these are capacities that actually are demanded by the arts. That is not to say that, what it is to say is if you don't get good at them, you don't get good at art. All of my artist friends, I run this by them all the time, and I say, all right, well, if you get good at doing something, you get good. All right? It's not that you put it in a box. You only dance on weekends. If you get good at thinking in a conditional way, that is theorizing, if I do this, what will happen and what are the consequences and how to respond, you have the capacity to do that. And if I invoke that capacity in another setting and I put before you a math problem, and I invoke conditional reasoning, or if I ask you to design an experiment in physics and I invoke conditional reasoning, the more places in the curriculum where you are practicing conditional reasoning, the better you're going to be at it. And the arts are a profound way of doing these things, and the advantage they have is they count. I put on here's a little diagram that Bransford uses. This is his general diagram for leading to adaptive expertise, which is, what schools are supposed to do. That is, what you learn you're supposed to use it in other locations. And John has this procedural knowledge wedded to what he calls innovation, which I prefer imagination. And he uses this a lot in his work, and if you read the How People Learn books, you see that. What I've said to him a couple of times, I said, John, the only problem with your model is, why does anybody do that? Why do they blend procedural knowledge in mathematics, the algorithmic content, to thinking differently and coming up with 6 solutions so they become adaptive experts? What wants them to learn math in the first place? So you need to put into your model motivation and the relevance of learning and the mattering of learning, which he's been putting in lately. And I said, when you do all that, John, you're describing arts. That is intrinsically a description of what happens in arts. It's a mattering, meaningful, motivating thing that brings together procedural, technical levels with the imagination and the possibility of creating something new, which gets you creativity. That is a model for the cognitive science involved in the arts. So what we did next, after doing this for a while, we wanted to look at a bunch of schools around the country, and we picked the worst schools we could find that actually over a 10-year period had transformed themselves from being on the edge of extinction, failures, dropout rates enormous. And we went in and I sent 15 researchers over a 3-year period into 10 case study schools to look at it. And we published a book called Third Space. And I wanted to bring that to your attention because it really epitomizes the notion. These were schools where they were elementary, middle, K6, and K8, and 2 high schools, and it's described there. What we discovered there is one of the fundamental things that engagement in the arts in this broad way is it changes relationships. And the metaphor third space, if some of you have had any philosophic background, it's a term often used in cultural anthropology, but also in philosophy. It's that condition where you enter into a new relationship. I use marriage as an example. Marriage is a third space construct. That is, 2 individuals come together, create a different kind of reality when they're together while retaining their own independence. But they achieve a great deal more as a pair, and so they create a third space. And when they bring children into a third space in a positive way, it's a transformative experience. Theater is a good example of that. What we began to look at then is the capacity of the arts to change relationships among students. And you can quickly see there, we did this over a, as I say, 3-year period and then published it. And that drew a quote from Sharon Robinson, who, as you know, is CEO of AACTE. By the way, at each point when we do this, I would get the Educational Research Association to air this and brew it about at AERA conventions. And they will always join us in releasing all of our research at major events. So when we released Third Space, we had quite a crowd. If you come across the book, you'll see supportive comments from everybody in the field of education research. What we discovered there, and I put down there quickly the findings from that work, and I won't go into the detail, but I was quoting this morning a high school outside of Providence in a school district where the dropout rate was 80%. And over about a 5-year period of embracing a form of arts integration generated out of the adolescent literacy field at Brown University, the dropout rate dropped to 20%. You find this across all the schools. Student retention, student attendance rates go up. Teacher retention goes up, and as you know, half them drop out within 5 years. Teacher retention goes up in schools because the arts create a culture and a climate of relationships that are very different than schools that don't have those kinds of relationships. And so you have academic improvement on the part of the kids, attendance on the part of the kids, teacher retention rate, tremendous parental involvement, and deeper engagement, and a creation of communities of learners, which, as you know, is the lingua franca now for what we're trying to do among teachers, create communities of learners. All those things are robustly present in schools that embrace quality learning activities in the arts. And I described there very briefly to you what arts? And there were three dimensions of the arts in these schools. One, people were taught piano, or they were taught acting, they were taught to write music, they were taught arts, to paint, to sculpt. But they also were, the collaborative relationships among the faculties created interdisciplinary, sometimes called integrated, arts activities across all these schools. So you had both physics being taught, but you had physics being taught in conjunction with some of the art forms in ways designed by collaboration activities among the faculty. So you preserve the quality of the individual disciplines, but you built a collaborative relationship which is particularly important in elementary and middle schools, particularly in middle schools, where in fact the child is still trying to grasp the holistic nature of the world, let alone parse it out into what constitutes biology as distinct from math. And so that these schools did arts, did interdisciplinary arts, and they also, in fact, then became very active in drawing into the schools the community at large, whether it's a rural community where the community drawn in were woodworkers, or where it was in downtown Manhattan where they were drawing in the Metropolitan Opera. One of the things, I was a assistant superintendent of schools for the state of Maryland, I don't know whether I mentioned that, and I was the executive assistant in charge of higher ed for Pennsylvania. I'm really old. That was in the early 70s. What we're all aware of is that to bring about transformation in teaching in schools is a combination of what you do in undergraduate, but it's the continuing work with teachers and the professional development work when they're actually out there in the bad world that they didn't know was going to be quite as challenging. So what we began to see in the third space work was the need to continue then to begin to work again with colleges and universities. So I chair for the state. I live in Maryland, so I chair a meeting of the deans of education and the arts in Maryland. We meet quarterly, and we are convened in conjunction with the president, and we meet 4 times a year. Because it seemed to me, and I do this because I had this role, and the governor and others asked me to do this. And so we've begun to look hard at, well, what's the significance of all this for the undergraduate education of teachers who are entering a world already full of challenges, and already full of challenges that you know well. How do we prepare them, in this case, to use the arts as an arrow in the quiver? We're not arguing silver bullet here. How do teachers going into today's classroom benefit all teachers from having an awareness of the potential of the arts being brought into play as part of their repertoire of teaching? And the state of Maryland just has adopted a new certification requirement, or not a requirement, a new certification certificate for our integrated arts. That'll lead me then to say quickly what the thoughts were of the committee who met and wanted me to bring to your attention. And then if we've got a few seconds, I can. Amy said I had to talk real fast, so I'm doing the best I can. One of the things we discovered talking to this group, which were deans and other in colleges of, they actually didn't know what was going on in one another's campuses, because we were talking about what's required for certification as an arts specialist and what's required for certification in K-6 in Texas. And they began to describe very different situations on their campuses. They were rather surprised, talking to one another. Oh, you mean someone can take a course X and it can count? And no, and another dean would say, well, no, that can't count. And so one of the things valuable from this conversation is that they didn't actually have a clear picture of what the situation was on the different universities. And one of the things they wanted to invite you to do is to talk to them and help them with you draw a picture of what actually is going on on the higher education campuses. In those courses that are required, 1 or 2 arts courses that are required for the K-6 certificate, but for those that are coming out as arts education majors in mainly visual arts or music, and where it exists, dance and theater, what is the composition of the courses? What is the structure of the courses? Because they were very clear with one another that it's being done very differently. So a basic, just a baseline of what's going on could be quite helpful. The second thing they wanted to suggest to you is that those courses that are required of both the arts specialists, the arts courses of which there are a number, but the one course that's required for K-6, that those courses take seriously the interdisciplinary possibilities of teaching the arts in conjunction with other courses, where, in my lingo, the content, processes, and methods of an art form are aligned with content and processes and methods of a cognate form. With the humanities is the easiest way to go on that, as you were pointing. But another, that is, engage in that one course that an elementary school teacher is going to have in the arts, a way in which that teacher learns in that course methods, processes, and content that can enable that teacher to bring that into her classroom in conjunction with other courses. And they really want very much to help design those courses so that they yield authentic learning in those courses. The third thing they would be just thrilled about, if there were other courses outside those required for certification that were available to education majors, where they would be encouraged to take other arts courses even though they're not required for the certification. They were quite aware of the fact that you'd roll over in your chair if somebody would say, add more arts courses to the requirements in the certified. I mean, everybody wants you to do that. And so they were much more interested in making the course that is required a richer learning experience, and then look at the possibility that there would be other courses that could be part of the total. And as I know from my own work, very few people going into classrooms take anything in theater and drama. As the commissioner was mentioning, I was an English teacher. Even English majors don't take any drama courses. Take literature. Fortunately. So they miss all the opportunity of figuring out how performances by young people, the whole British tradition, transforms early childhood education. They don't have a clue. So, and then the final thing that they were interested in is to flip it the other way. Anybody studying in the humanities, and we were talking about this earlier, anybody coming out as an undergraduate English major really ought to have some experiences in performing drama. Or in other subject areas, the people coming out in those other disciplines ought to have the benefit, particularly which is now available through the immense digitalization of the world. And I know you have a strategy, as I understand it, across the campuses of advancing what I call digitalization, call it technology, call it whatever, as an extraordinarily important tool for learning, tool for discovery, and a tool that the kids already have available. How anybody coming out of an undergraduate teaching program now needs to have a mastery of some dimension and deploy media possibilities. And to my mind, that avenue gives a rich possibility for tapping into the immense wealth of arts-related information and processes that the media, by definition, are. So they were the 4 recommendations and suggestions that they wanted to bring before you, with the hope that the conversation that the Commissioner has initiated today you would have on your own campuses, and you would, and they would continue to have among them. So, was that what they wanted me to say?
I think so.
Well, there, I've said it, I'm glad. I put up here 2 websites. The first is Arts Education Partnership website, AEP. Everything I've talked about is there, downloadable by free. All of the publications, critical links, all the reports, third space. The second is a website that we created that I call to your attention, and note that it is not the word imagination. It is theimagination.net. That's where all the polling data we did over the past 2 years on the American voters' attitudes toward what they want out of schools and what they want out of school subjects and their commitment to the desire to have arts broadly construed present in schools. 91% of voters want arts in schools, and they want it in conjunction with basic skills, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and they don't want those things done without the arts in schools. And this is we shared this with all the presidential campaigns. It's there. It's 500 pages, cross-tab, statistically valid. I had it challenged by everybody that I could think of. It's an important piece of attitudes on the part of the American public right now that is not much known, though I must say that the candidate who won the election was very much interested in this. So I bring that to your attention, too. Well, thank you for letting me barge in as an outsider from out of town. And thank you, Commissioner, for giving me the time. And if you got 20 seconds for any question or comment, I'd be
questions,
happy.
Comments?
The political world is often not determined by polls, except certain ones that are paid attention to. But we have a state board of education that has to ultimately approve curriculum and set the number of hours and what's in it. And then the testing systems drive what people do in schools. The point here would be that, first of all, I agree there's lots of work for us to do to both comprehend this area and not play school as we know it, but to be intellectually rich and divergent in the way we think about imagination. Social emotional growth, I think, is directly connected. But when we talk about partnerships between the preparation of teachers and what goes on in schools, what we're talking about here can often just stop at the schools. That's sort of an island unto itself. Talk about what you know about bridging the gap, getting schools interested in taking advantage of teachers who understand this area of work and can actually bring it into their classrooms.
The problem is time. The great barrier is time. I want to say that right up front because the problem with standardized accountability and No Child is, as you know, time. In Chicago, kids are only in school 4.5 hours a day. Here, what is it, probably 6. So time is a great barrier. What we know, by the way, we've published a report called Teaching Partnerships, where we studied what was going on in about 30 campuses around the country on this problem. How do you create a genuine relationship between the university campus, particularly teacher ed, and school districts and individual schools? We went down the road of looking at professional schools. And professional schools is a model that can work. The problem is there's not enough arts in them. So we built a whole set of strategies and looks, and where it works very, very well. What you have to do, of course, is to convince school administration that the collaboration with you is an enormous payoff for them, because they get a role in helping you prepare the very teachers they're going to hire, and then they have a collaboration with you to keep those teachers learning through the ongoing professional development and increased certification. How do you get in the door to convince them that an arts dimension is important? Our experience has been when we trotted out the research findings. I could, for instance, there have been huge studies in North Carolina across sets of schools. The Transforming Arts Education Through the Arts, the Annenberg work, we published all that work, where we looked at sets of schools, and we did a study of 300 school districts, by the way, Gaining the Arts Advantage. And when we began to see the factors that had to be in place in a school district in terms of including community support, showed it to school administrators, showed them the payoff, in many cases the non-new cost payoff. Because this is not necessarily new money if they have arts teachers already. It's reconfiguring the use of those teachers, creating an openness of collaboration where they can work with you, where you can place for the practicums in those schools undergraduates who can in fact come into those settings with an attitude and with skills you're developing, so it becomes a successful experience on both sides of the equation. And we laid out the strategies that are needed to have that happen in teaching partnerships. We then went together with the Dana Foundation, and I don't know whether they just published a piece where they looked at colleges and universities across the country who were doing good preparation of arts specialists prepared to deal with today's realities in today's classrooms. That is, you're not always going to be able to go into the band room and close the doors. So I guess what I wanted to say is what I said to a group earlier today. There is a lot going on around the country that's very, very good. That my view is that almost any problem we've raised, someone is solving, but they're solving it in a micro way. I mean, it's a couple schools here. It's maybe a good school district there. Not even the wealthiest school districts are doing this extremely right. So what we need is this aggregation of the best practices to bring to your attention. That's what we've been doing in Maryland repeatedly. We have a whole network of schools now in school districts. Maryland's blessed. It only has 24 school districts. They're all counties. Now, some of them are the largest school districts in the country, but there's so you've got an advantage there. Pennsylvania was a more cognate case for you, 504 school districts. So it's a continuum of decisions, but it's a collaborative effort. It's how do you build collaborations with the willing districts and the willing schools, so you can prove the case in those contexts. You can prove it to your case yourself, and then prove it, to the young teachers coming through. So there are success stories that abound. New York is a good case. The commissioner and I were talking about earlier, where Lincoln Center, through the Lincoln Center Institute, works with about 7 or 8 of the colleges of education at the campuses around Manhattan, have been for about 10 years. And most of those campuses now have very good interdisciplinary activity across the ed and art schools, with feeding into the a million kids in the boroughs. So they're good examples of how that can be done.
Can I just add something on a statewide basis that's happening right now that might help, or we hope will help, with the state board and coming on down into the schools, is the interim study on the education committee out of the legislature. They are proposing some changes to the accountability standards, and one of the things that they're looking at are 2 different tiers, one which would be accreditation and one would be distinction tier. And under that distinction tier, which schools would be graded by, they're now listing fine arts. And I think once it's starting to get that recognition at a legislative level, hopefully that will filter down into the state board and down to the campuses.
Two comments. When I was at the Rockefeller Foundation in New York, we worked. We funded the Lincoln Center's arts education program, and we looked at some of the data regarding educational outcomes, and particularly the schools in Harlem that had been involved in this arts education initiative, and we saw some very compelling data that test results were improving across the board. There was a very distinct retention aspect that was explainable by no other factor than the presence of arts education, because otherwise the schools were exactly the same, and and the schools that had higher retention rates had robust arts education programs, usually in an integrated approach. So there are a lot of data that show that arts education is really instrumental in improving educational outcomes and overall retention. But on a personal level, back to the days when I was an English professor, one of the areas that I would teach regularly was transcendentalism. Thoreau, Emerson, and so forth. And I remember having a difficult time getting the students to understand transcendentalism in its own particular context as a literary school, as a form of literary expression in the middle of the 19th century. And then I changed the course, and instead of calling it transcendentalism, I called it American Romanticism. And instead of just teaching the literary works, I taught political romanticism and talked about Andrew Jackson's presidency and his praise of the common man. And then I enlarged it to include the Hudson River Valley painters, and so that they could see those expressions of American Romanticism. Then I included this. It took me about 5 years to get this right, and then I included some of the American folk music traditions that were arising in the middle of the 19th century. And what I found was we actually read fewer literary works, but the students actually understood the concept of literary transcendentalism a lot better because they saw the links and they saw the manifestations in other fields. So in a way, it does take more time, but it saves you time down the road. And so I in my own personal experience, when I worked as a consultant on the literature curriculum for the Los Angeles Unified School Districts, when we got the teachers, for example, who were teaching Macbeth and Julius Caesar and some other Shakespearean plays strictly as literary texts, the test results were much less favorable than they were when we trained the teachers to actually teach them as those plays as what they were intended to be, which is to say performances. And so I would hope that you will go back to your campuses and look once again very closely at how arts education can be integrated into the training of all teachers. Lincoln Center, as Dick pointed out, had extraordinary success in improving educational outcomes, particularly in the New York City schools that were essentially provided teachers by the schools of education in the mostly in Manhattan, but in some of the outlying areas around Manhattan as well. Some of the results I saw were really astonishing, and I hope that you will look very seriously at how you can improve educational results when your teachers go into the field if they have a strong foundation in arts education. Any other comments or questions of our guests?
Throw money? You want to throw money? But thank you for your attention. If I can be of any, I'm retired as of a few months ago, and if I can be of any assistance in making those materials available to you, just let me know. Thank you, Commissioner, for the time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, let's move on with the agenda. Let's go back to where we were. Let's go to item 2. And now, why don't you give us an overview of what you've been doing?
Thank you, Raymond. May I apologize for my voice. The cedar blew down out of Colorado here recently, and I'm feeling the results of it. I'll try to be clear. Thank you so much for having us come to talk about this business. I thought I'd give you something of what you already know, which is the background of the Richland Foundation Forum, which we put into place in the very late 80s, early 90s, to begin looking at the question that we were really concerned about, which was, at that time, what could we do to improve teaching and learning in our public schools? We had 4 different studies of existing teacher and administrator preparations in many of your institutions, and we then put together some suggestions as to what we thought might be done to strengthen that process to make that a more effective performance than it was. I think out of that, I would say the biggest thing that happened was our pushing the field-based approach. Up to that point, there were a great many university programs which were pretty solidly anchored in the lecture hall, winding up with a certain amount of student teaching at the end, perhaps, but very little activity in terms of the interaction between the teaching process going on for teachers and the actuality of what was happening in the classroom and how the two would interact. So we published 4 different reports on that, and from that we then went and talked to a lot of you about the way in which you would like to modify your programs to speak to some of the issues raised by those studies. and I'm glad to say that a whole lot of you did, and we've supported programs all the way from El Paso to Texarkana and from Dallas to the Valley. And there's been, I think, very definite improvement in the way in which you all are preparing teachers for this current world, which is very different from what it was 30 or 40 years ago. Having gone through that period, we then looked further 4 or 5 years ago and said, yeah, but we still haven't made the level of progress we might like to see. Reference to what was just said about the arts, we're still struggling with the dropout issue. We're still struggling with scores that fall off in the later high school years. We obviously are a long way from cracking the nut of turning out a quality education for every youngster from every background, which is what we've got to do. So that led us into saying, where do we go from here? And that in turn brought to mind our establishing another, in this case, more of a research project looking at this issue of teaching and learning. That led to our appointing a 18-person advisory committee, of which Raymond was one, there's several others here, and Jill Burke was going to speak about the program. We'll go into that a little bit. That group has come up with a great many, I think, very intelligent approaches to what we need to do that we're not currently doing. Let me just tick off what I think are the major points. I won't examine them. I'll leave that to Bob Wimpelberg and Jill. But what really were the main points that came out of the year plus of discussions with a lot of people from other aspects of the academic world was, number one, that the universities had to play a far more important role in this than has been the case in recent years. As you know, numbers of students, and I would say in some cases quality in the teaching field has gone down, particularly at the high school level. A large proportion of the teaching preparation programs in your universities is devoted to the elementary and to some degree middle schools, and not enough to the high schools. And so this group examined that, and what came out was essentially these items, which are our goals. Number one, that the university had to take on the preparation of teachers and to some degree administrators, mainly teachers, as a mission, not just something to be nice to do, but as a university mission and across the university. It had to be recognized and accepted in virtually every department across the university that it could have anything to do with anything that those teachers were going to do in their teaching careers. So it would be the people in your colleges, it would be the people in physics and math and English and language, all of those combining with efforts to see to it that we turned out teachers who really were able to perform that job of getting to students. Secondly, in the university, there had to be top leadership to make that happen. There were going to be something that you all wanted to follow. Your presidents and your chancellors and your boards were all going to have to say, yes, the university has to take on responsibility of preparing more teachers and preparing them better, particularly at the high school level. And thirdly, I would argue that they have to be collaborating with the community colleges and the schools. Something like the model of the Regency's program at A&M a number of years ago, which Bill Reeves, who's back there and is our consultant, I'll say a word about that, did. It was really addressing this, that all of the A&M campuses were connecting to those other groups up and down the line, and not just an occasional meeting once a year, but regularly, so there was a flow of information and flow of activity from the one to the other. Think about, for example, universities should play some role in the whole issue of recruitment. To say, hey, one of the best things in the world you can do, kids, is to be teachers. There's not much of that going on. And then on up through directing courses through the community colleges and into the four-year school. So the university has to be playing that role and not the relatively passive one of waiting for students to come and then trying to better educate them. And finally, on that score, I would say it is absolutely in the self-interest of the university to take on this major role, because those youngsters are the raw material that you all are working with when they enter your freshman classes. And you complain a great deal about the fact that you have to have a number of remedial courses to bring them up to the level necessary to carry on work at your universities. Well, whose fault is that? In part, it's yours, unless you are involved in helping the process through relationships with the high schools, with the community colleges, and on into their graduation, and then into the induction period of following them as they enter into their careers. So we're putting the spotlight on you folks and saying we think you can do more to make sure that 10 years from now we will have accomplished the goals of providing quality educations for all of those students. And folks, it's not going to be fewer, it's going to be a whole lot more between now every year as our population grows. So that's the challenge we see. I want to mention that Bill Reeves has been our consultant and has been really much the leader of this, and Jill and Bob have been very, very strong members of that group, and I commend all of them. So that's the foundation's position is this, and we, as we have before, will continue in this ball game. I'm looking for opportunities to help people move in this direction at the higher education level. With that, I'd like to pass it on to Bob and Jill and let them give you a little more of the detail of what's going on.
I wanted to talk just a little bit about the process. I was very fortunate to be part of the forum, and so I was a representative and Bob, but also I want to mention that Bill Geiger was the other dean from UT Tyler. And then if you'll bear with me, I thought it might help you to hear the list of participants who were involved in the forum. Mr. Neil Adams, who was the vice chair of the coordinating board and is now counsel for TASA. Dr. Frank Ashley, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, A&M System. Ken Craycraft, Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs for the Texas State University System. Mr. Bruce Esterling from the Meadows Foundation, George Granger from the Houston Endowment, Dr. Susan Hawley from Texas Association of School Administrators. Cynthia Fisher-Miller was involved, Senior Director of the Workforce and Education, Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Linda Mora, Deputy Superintendent, Northside ISD. The Commissioner certainly was involved. Dr. Sylvester Perez, Superintendent, Midland ISD. And Mr. Wilkie, and then we had the CREATE support staff, and also the Aspen Institute really facilitated the discussions. And I think you could already hear that we were really focusing on what colleges of education can do to improve the quality and the quantity of teachers produced. We can all make a list of constraints and issues that we face and point lots of fingers, but we wanted to look at it from the perspective of, but what can we do, and what do we have control of, and what can we improve? And we looked at teacher preparation, as I know you do, as this whole continuum, recruitment, not just the preparation, but the placement, induction, and then the development on the other end as well. So we looked at it as the continuum and then took slices of that, and each time we'd say, well, what are the best practices in recruitment? What can we learn from alternative providers? And what can we learn from other universities in terms of what's working well for them? So we looked at the whole range and again tried to identify what best practices were already in existence, and I know there are many, many others that we haven't even discovered that exist at your institutions. But then we had many, many conversations and interviews and discussions, and eventually distilled all that information into the document that Bob is going to talk about.
We thought it was appropriate and in fact necessary to bring it to this group before it goes to our presidents and provosts, lest you get a call saying, I've got this document, and they send it over to your office, right, do something about this. I mean, that's often what happens. Jill described the process very well, and I would say what will end up in this report is a distillation of not only the ideas. I mean, we wrestled, we fussed at each other. There were times when we quit talking to each other until after dinner because some pretty tough things were said and some real questions asked. And all of this is going to flow into a document that will be released as a report from the Sid Richardson Foundation. Now, the tradition here is this report gets released in large volume, in attractive volume, and it goes to everybody. So my guess is going to be this will be a report that will be, first of all, that'll get some buzz. It'll get some buzz in the quarters of our presidents, chancellors, provosts, but also in the legislature. The other thing you need to know is there's a commitment to drive the ideas in this report, as we say, past putting them on the shelf. There is already a piece of legislation drafted that might encourage the legislature to incent what needs to be done. But in the interest of just giving all of us here an advanced view of it, let me say there are 9 fundamental principles and then 3 policy issues. People are going to start writing. Val, how soon will this group? This group you have the draft in front of you, so you don't need to take notes unless you really want to. But just more or less final. Very quickly, those 9 principles the first couple have to do with getting university-wide attention, and the notion here is keep in mind this is about teacher preparation. But keep in mind it's really fundamentally about critical shortage areas and secondary. That's its focus. And this would make sense to most of us because we're finding that our elementary teachers are all placed almost before they finish their student teaching, and the recruiters are coming back from Nebraska saying I didn't need as many this time as I needed last time. So except for critical shortage areas, elementary is becoming reasonably flush. What we know is the persistent areas are in secondary. Why the university attention? Well, that's where it's a coordinated process. Those folks don't major with us, hence they don't show up on our rolls, they don't become our students, so to speak. It requires going over to some other college or some other unit, right? And we've done the analysis at the University of Houston, and we find that the steepest decline in numbers for our productivity is in those areas, and it goes by level of necessary coordination. That is to say, the steepest downward trend lines go continuously with programs that require more coordination with some other unit. And so, I mean, there's a whole story to be told there. You know that those units tend to want their majors for, quote, their purposes. So to entice them into teaching requires a whole new set of behaviors and activities. And hence, the first 2 principles prioritize teacher preparation, particularly in critical shortage areas, and particularly for high school, as a university issue. Prioritize it up with getting the engineering program among the 50 best in the world or something like that. Second, lead from the chancellor, provost, president's office. Lead this effort. Make it a part of the conversation. That's the second point advocated. The third, set goals. Val referred to the Regents Initiative at the NM system, and one impressive thing about that was that, as I recall, each campus in the NM system had a production set of goals to meet of particular kinds of teachers, as I recall, Bill, right? So that College Station was going to produce X number of more special ed teachers. Well, this calls for each of us to do that, and it does it quite intelligently. It says, how are you going to plan for the resources needed if you don't know how many folks you're going to try to recruit and produce? So setting goals, university priorities, set goals, manage those results, recruit. Val's absolutely right. We don't, except those of us now replicating the You Teach program, which we're doing at UH and North Texas and Lamar. We just talked to them. They're interested. There's active recruitment there. One could argue that's one of the most unique parts of that program. As soon as somebody says, I want to major in math or science because they've responded to something in our system, they get a postcard. Have you ever thought about teaching? What about being in our program? We call it Teach Houston, and we badger them till many of them take part in a free experience, and then we hold on to as many as possible. So active recruitment. We probably wouldn't need to do that in English language arts or social studies, history, as much as math and science, but in the critical shortage areas, it is put forward as one of the 9 principles: engage in active recruitment for high school teachers. Train intellectual thought leaders. Think about our curriculum. I mean, this comes to mind in our first presentation. Are our teachers broadly imaginative? Do our teachers go beyond, in essence, more rote stuff into engaging kids around the conceptual basis of what they're teaching? Engage faculty and reward them. Now, we talk about this a lot, don't we? What are the P&T requirements and what are the P&T incentives? If a university isn't discussing those actively, can you really recruit a teacher-educator into a department of mathematics where the faculty is going to say, where have you been pushing the boundaries of mathematical theory? And you've recruited somebody who's really interested in how kids think about math and whether, if a teacher knows math really well, that person can engage kids around learning it. Engaging and rewarding faculty is one of the elements. And then partnerships with schools. Again, this is nothing new at all, but we must continue to explore this territory with schools. And as you could tell from my question, I don't think there's any issue we can engage in on the campus and do extremely well that's going to turn into practice, unless it makes it to the policy makers who then determine what drives what goes on in schools. Well, that's not their problem. That's their problem and our problem together. So in this work as well, knowing what schools need in terms of numbers, what's going to be the life of a teacher that comes from your institution and goes into school X, how you provide support, what the schools might be able to do to help us both with recruitment out of high school. What about recruiting high school kids who have an early interest, following them into the community college and then into our institutions? That sort of thing requires partnerships with school districts. Val made a very strong point about connecting to community colleges. What are the numbers now? 80% of our new students leaving high school to go into a post-secondary institution are going to go into community colleges, and they're not going to come into our four-year institutions. So again, we have this delayed reaction, and everything's going to happen too late if we don't pursue them as they make those transitions. And then finally, one of the things that frustrates the people at CREATE and all of us is that while we have a lot of folks among our faculty doing research, relatively few do research about teacher preparation. And I said, well, I kind of understand that because they're researching themselves and their colleagues and maybe their administrators ultimately, but there's a call for research on quality preparation of teachers. What is it that teachers need to know and be able to do, and what kind of programs produce those qualities? So that's, in sum, the 9 principles, and then this translates into public policy. You need to think if your lead administrators will take you there. Okay, if we do all this inside, then what? Understand that there's an intention to bring this to the legislature and to say nothing will happen if this set of activities isn't incented. Now, the governor's, what's the special program? The governor is going to allocate money to incentive funding. The governor has teacher preparation in the incentive funding, but this would propose a more systematic approach to that and to say I believe there are categories in his incentive funding for critical shortage areas. This would encourage a much more purposeful and dedicated program. It also encourages coordinating federal policy with state policy when it comes to teacher quality. It encourages a data system. This is almost getting tiresome. A data system so that we can connect kids with teachers and we can connect teachers with programs. formula funding that would especially enhance the formula funding that would help us do student recruitment, make the right kinds of faculty hires in this area, and in other words, a state apparatus that comes in behind what we intend to do. So this is a report that will be hitting the streets early next year. It may be something we want to talk about in TACTI about how to, in fact, be the ones to take it to our lead administrators. If you're like mine, they will have lots of other things on their minds, and this will be, in some ways, a relatively new idea. If you have one person from the arts and sciences you can take with you, it makes a huge difference. I mean, they get the message, they get the point. We'll have better students ready for college algebra and even ready for college calculus if we do better with the kids who come to our campuses. And except for A&M and UT, we are all regional campuses, I think, almost without exception. I mean, we do get kids closer to home. So if we do better by the kids and teachers in the schools they're in, it is going to come back to help us in our own institutions. So let me pause there. Just one other mention. Maybe I'll ask a question. How many of you are familiar with the nostalgic, what's called Science, Math, and Technology Imperative, fairly recently announced? Okay. It does the same thing, right? It says, how about campus leaders taking responsibility, particularly for science and math teacher preparation? At UH, we're going to couple these two in trying to get, I guess, a set of public statements and a commitment from our folks. If you don't know about nostalgic is the National Association of State Universities and land-grant colleges, so it tends to be the bigger public. So if that garble doesn't mean much to you, that may be why. But most of the public institutions in this state are members of nostalgic. You might want to go to their website and have a look at what's called, they call it SMITI, Science, Mathematics, and Technology Imperative, not initiative, and see if there's a way you want your institution to be involved. They just called for those commitments this week, but there may be a way to be involved. It's a very similar effort from that organization nationwide to get the large publics to take some responsibility via the leadership.
Very good, Bob. I think I'd like to ask Bill to say a word. He's been the leader, really, of this from the very beginning, and I think you don't have to give a speech, Bill, but some comments?
I don't really, other than reinforcing both what Jill, Bob, and Val said, and thanking them for their work on this. I do think that this is an opportunity, once more, for teacher educators in the state, in the sense that I think it's going to, when the report does come out next year early, I think that it will serve our purposes in terms of keeping these issues of teacher preparation up on the front burner, as opposed to maybe being set aside for other, maybe more pressing priorities. And so I really think that to that extent, the foundation has done really our profession and our segment of the education mission a real service here in terms of keeping this, keeping the ball bouncing as it relates to this. I think what happens with this now, the principles that are laid out, what happens with this now really relies upon where you want to take and where all of us will take our individual institutions, and where your faculties would be in terms of really grasping this and taking it forward. The one point that was made in the preamble to all this is that when we look at the teacher production trends within the consortium itself, and our consortium is now 37 universities in the state, and when we look at them, those production trends over a 5-year rate, over a 5-year period, production is declining in virtually every institution, and as Bob has already said, those declines are most profound in the area of secondary education. It's an area that universities seem to be relinquishing, and it comes at a time when Commissioner Paredes, the coordinating board, State Board of Education, and others are promoting higher levels of college readiness, and so we kind of have these two things working at cross purposes. So the idea here is to ask people to do more and to really try to place this within your institution as a higher priority. The only other comment would be to thank Commissioner Paredes, because I think, again, in addition to the work, to Val's work at the foundation and what they're trying to do through the forum, I think Commissioner Paredes has really been an active member and a consistent member of the forum, and he certainly has embraced this particular aspect of our work. I think he's genuinely sincere about trying to see if we can find constructive ways of increasing the quality and the number of teachers that are available. So we thank you also.
Oh, I certainly want to echo that, Raymond. Also, I might tell you, we will be publishing and distributing something in the range of 30,000 to 40,000 copies of this, as we have in the past, which will go pretty well blanket Texas and reach out to a number of organizations outside of the state as well. So we hope that'll get attention at least, and it depends then on our keeping talking up these issues in places where it'll matter.
I'd like to open things up for discussion. Let me just cite a couple of statistics that have really been troubling us here at the agency and have troubled members of the board itself. Some of you may know that there is currently a commission that is completing its work that was established by the legislature. It's the Commission on Higher Education and Global Competitiveness, and they've been looking at data which are scary. Texas is among the bottom 10 states in sending students directly from high school to college. We have one of the lowest college completion rates among the largest states. The cost of achieving some sort of indication of completion in Texas is among the highest in the country, whether a certificate in a career and technical education field is an associate's degree or a baccalaureate. Because and the root, of course, is that we have such a large number of students who are poorly prepared to do college and university work. Another statistic that is chilling, which I cite all the time, the American College Testing Service, which tests about 78,000 high school students every year for college readiness, has found that 20% of Texas high school graduates are college ready across the board. That's obviously very, very low. 50% of the students that go into higher education in Texas require developmental education. I remember last year when that report, Tough Choices or Tough Times, came out, pointed out that unlike the highest performing countries in the world, which typically attract their teachers from the highest achievers in their universities, our teachers by and large come from the bottom third of their university classes. That's not to say we don't have a lot of excellent teachers in Texas, but that's not a prescription for success. The McKinsey report, which I'm sure many of you have read, points out that a country like Korea, their teachers, particularly in elementary school, come from the top 5% of their university graduating classes. Finland, which is among the highest achieving countries in the world, attracts teachers from, once again, the top ranks of university classes. And that comment by a South Korean educator who said, which I think pretty much distilled the challenges we have in this country and in this state. You can't expect teachers to teach what they can't do themselves. And I think that's at the root of what we have to do as university faculty and administrators. We have to attract more of our most able students into the teaching profession. We have to train them at much higher levels of rigor. We have an opportunity, which is one of the reasons we convened you today. We have $100 million in our our legislative appropriations request for incentive funding for general academic institutions, that is to say universities. We are talking with the governor's office right now about using a chunk of that money. We've been talking about something in the $30 million range to incentivize universities to give a higher priority to the training of secondary school teachers, particularly in math and science. Now I know that having been on a university campus for most of my career, particularly a major research university, I know that typically when universities have ambitions to move up in the ranks and move up in the ratings, they don't usually consider education to be a high priority. In fact, as I said at meetings that the Richardson Foundation convened, that there's an inverse relationship between the prestige of a university and its interest in training teachers. And we have to do something about that in Texas. And so I'm hopeful that the governor's office will support this idea that we are going to create incentives for universities to place more emphasis on training secondary school teachers in math and science and attracting many more of their best students into teaching. We need your best ideas about how to do that. You have a draft of what we prepared in your packet, and I guess, Judy, we're going to talk about that. Is that?
Yes, we can. Is it? Did we put it?
Commissioner, we didn't actually put the draft in this. We were just going to talk about it.
Okay.
Given that it's a potential governor's incentive program.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to talk about it, but we were going to give anything out in writing.
Okay. Well, we need your ideas about what you think would work on your campus, what you think both in terms of attracting many more of our best students into teaching as a profession, what we can do to help you revise, re-examine, adjust your teacher preparation programs, what we might be able to do to shorten the length of time it takes to train teachers. We just need some fresh approaches. I can tell you that I don't think that incentive funding, an incentive funding proposal to increase the number of able secondary school teachers in math and science will work unless it represents a significant level of innovation. I don't think we're going to be able to sell business as usual for incentive funding. And I think some of the ideas that were discussed in the Richardson forums are a good jumping off point, and I'm sure a lot of you have good ideas. And so I'd like to devote most of the time that we have left to discussion of this issue. Yes.
Much better. I need to preface my remarks by saying that I've only been in education since 1970, and every day is still a learning experience for me. However, I came from the state of Massachusetts, where I received a very traditional education in the state college system before going to BU and then NYU, and then to law school. I feel very naive sitting here today, as I've only been in Texas since July 1. However, I also feel like the child in the story, The Emperor's New Clothes. Because I feel like I came in and I'm looking at something saying, oh my God, he's naked. Why can't we, in colleges of education, have more control over secondary education? I have no control at Kingsville over secondary education. The faculty in arts and sciences essentially tell my faculty what they're going to do. Now, we don't have any joint appointments, and I don't see that coming in the near future. I think, and I hate to say the name, so I won't say it, but when a certain legislator here in the state of Texas decided that content needed to be in the arts and sciences, even back then, I wanted to write him a letter and say, you're not a teacher and you just don't understand. It needs to be in teacher education where we can teach content and pedagogy at the same time. But that having been said, I also worry about the fact that at the undergraduate level, the state of Texas has decreased the credit requirement for our undergraduate students to 120 credits, unless there's an explicit reason as to why it must be increased, maybe another 3 or 6 or 9 credits. Where I come from, that's unconscionable. I spent most of my career in New York City and Long Island. And no undergraduate would come out of undergraduate studies with less than 28 credits. That was the minimum. Most finished around 136 credits. So that we could give the students more individualized programs looking at their individual needs. If they needed, as a math major, if they needed more math, we could require more math of them. I also worry about the fact that here in the state of Texas there are little incentives for teachers to come into teaching. One, it's not respected. I have a sister who's been a teacher in the state of Texas since 1979. She just retired. And there's very little respect for teachers. In order for her, and this is a side, in order for her to receive Social Security upon her retirement with her very meager salary, which, by the way, was less than new teachers coming into Houston, she went and spent a summer filing in some of the school districts so that she'd qualify for Social Security. That's no way of drawing teachers into this profession. In addition to which, not that I think that the state of New York is the be-all and end-all. Don't forget, I'm from Massachusetts, where it all began. But I do think that New York is doing it right by requiring that teachers earn a master's degree within the first 5 years of receiving their initial certification and baccalaureate degree. We have no such requirement. We have no teeth to bring people back to learn more. If Arts and Sciences remains in control of secondary education content area, then can't we make them more accountable? If I were to remove the Arts and Sciences test scores, that is to say the secondary education test scores for the teaching, the Texas exam, my pass rate would jump up to 99.9% of passing. By including in secondary education, I drop down to approximately 78%. And again, I reiterate, I have little control over the faculty, and they don't even want to remediate. In fact, one math department chairperson suggested that I send better students. I was quick to remind him that they were his students. I'm hoping that we can look at some of the bigger problems. The report that you've generated is absolutely outstanding. However, I think there are systemic problems that need to be looked at. And one of those systemic problems is, where is secondary education? And then the societal issue of how can we make education more profitable and more exciting. I would hazard a guess that not one of you in this room had a teacher who didn't want to be there, who wasn't a respected member of society. I had English teachers who came in dressed like Macbeth. I had social studies teachers who came in playing bagpipes. I had math teachers who had competitions within the classroom to make math a practical matter rather than algebra for the sake of algebra. And I would hazard a guess that most of us are of the generation that have remarkable teachers like that. We need to create those remarkable teachers again, but we'll need the legislators' help in putting things back in perspective. Did I just lose my job?
If I could ask you not to remove the mic. I've been told that because of the ones that are listening on the internet, when you get it closer to your mouth, it just blares at them. So if you're comfortable with just bringing the mic closer, but just don't remove it from the system.
I apologize, but
it's not a problem. I wasn't aware of what happened.
Well, a couple of responses. Clearly, one of the challenges in order to make this work is how do we incentivize a closer working relationship between the schools and the colleges of arts and science or liberal arts or whatever they're called, from campus to campus, and schools or colleges of education. If I don't know if there is a consensus around your comment that we need to require students, or we may need to require students to take more courses. That will be a tough sell in the legislature for reasons I don't need to get into. But if there needs to be some changes in legislation in order to accomplish our goals, we're happy to listen, and we propose legislation to members of the legislature all the time.
But, Raymond, it's really going to require action from the university.
Right.
Chart the course.
No, and I said, how do you first of all solve the problems at the campus level, and if there are problems beyond that, we can help address them. But
are you suggesting then that it's we who need to go back to the legislature and say 120 credits just isn't working?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure there's a consensus around that that's a widely shared belief. I've heard people say that's not the issue at all. I think what this group needs to do, what we would like to hear today, is the identification of some of the challenges that we have to address, and potential remedies, and how we can come up with a strong plan that for incentive funding to improve both the quality and the preparation of high school teachers in math and science. Yes, sir.
I think you've already started a program that will help some of the collaboration through the college readiness initiatives. I think there's lots of opportunities for faculty within those colleges to collaborate with College of Ed faculty and work together toward trying to improve the teaching and learning of those content areas. So that's one step. I think, one of the problems that all of us have, and I know that it's better than it was a few years ago, but that's scholarships for. I remember back when I was a math and science teacher and going through college, there was a National Defense Education Loan, and some of those things are available now, but that needs to happen. The fully funding the student loan programs within the state of Texas, and some of that would certainly help.
Maybe we should lay out what we're proposing,
I would
Susan.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah.
This is very draft. This is not for publication, actually. Ted, you're right on target. We were trying to focus on providing some pretty significant scholarship money for undergraduates, postgraduates, even graduate level work, focusing on the STEM areas, some significant state level support in terms of leadership from this agency to help with some marketing recruitment campaigns for turning around the image, exactly what you said about trying to make teaching a much more attractive option for people to even start considering. We would match, really what we've proposed is to match the level of scholarship with a like amount of funding that would go to the university to help support really significant programmatic changes for those students. In other words, if you're really trying to attract high-performing students, and we've set a very high gatekeeper opportunity right now in this proposal, which we won't go into detail, but if you're going to attract those really high-performing students, in my opinion, as an ex-faculty member, I think we have to really look at some of our coursework and make sure that the coursework is ratcheted up to be challenging, interesting, engaging to really high-performing students. You and I have all heard sometimes somebody says some of our courses are not engaging. Well, that's not, those courses that are not engaging are not going to keep and attract those teachers that we're trying to attract and produce. So there would be money to do that. There would be some pretty significant commitments on the part of the institutions that would participate to promise to follow those students into those first years. There'd be some money to do that in different ways. Obviously, if we're trying to attract and train very high quality committed students, we need to make sure that those teachers who are providing the clinical experiences are on board and have the same philosophy. So, you know, these are all pieces. I mean, I can't go into great detail, but you understand, all of us know the elements. That part's known. It's like putting together a coherent package with enough funding to support some changes. So that's really the proposal in very broad strokes. We have high hopes that it would be something that's successful.
And aren't you talking about 1,600? Supporting about 1,600 students initially through the funding?
And candidates. That's what we were hoping to do about each year. And I don't know how much more detail you want to get into. We were going to target some areas and, you know, have a competitive process with some pretty high commitments on the parts of institutions and their partner schools to be sure that everybody's on board. I'll be honest, I don't see this as here's a pot of money and go thou and do good things. I see this as a pot of money that we would really work together with some strong state leadership, collaborative approach, so that we get the biggest push for the money that we're asking for.
I didn't hear if you mentioned the spectrum of needs, and it may come through a different automatic picture, but to support teachers in the STEM field, once you get into the field, in terms of working with similar faculty at institutions over the summers throughout the early part of their career to really help them develop as scholars.
I didn't use the scholars word, but I did say something about continuing support. But there are a number of specific elements that you could get down to.
Susan, I was wondering if you have taken a look at the federal legislation for the Teach Grant.
We did.
Because on our campus, as the dean, I sent a letter, an email letter to all students who were in math science.
Great.
And I invited them to come. I said, if you have ever been interested in becoming a teacher, now is the time maybe to come forward, because there is $16,000 if you qualify.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 60 people show up.
Great.
And we have probably 40 that have entered into that Teach Grant, which commits a person, they receive $16,000 overall for the 4 years, but they have to commit to the 4 years.
And that's roughly the model that we...
Okay. So you will have, they would have to teach in a high-need school, in a high-need area?
We didn't get to that level of specificity. There certainly is a commitment to teach. We at this point, we did not specify a high-needs school. It may get to that point, but we did not at this point.
Part of this is to encourage some of our better students to go into this field. So that this wouldn't be that get involved in December, but it would be a step above that.
A higher GPA than what is in the Teach Grant?
I believe it is, if I remember correctly.
Another aspect.
Yes.
Understanding what you were talking about earlier in terms of the other departments, I know actually I was on Long Island at one time, and there was a problem with the College of Liberal Arts taking folks who wanted to be teachers and telling them you shouldn't be. I know that's the case in Texas. And so to create a program which, number one, people would realize, say in their math class, that some of these better students are actually planning to be teachers, because the piece that provides a $5,000 grant for a master's degree, once they've been in the program long enough, another incentive for them to stay in teaching, but to help bring back the respect, to help bring back the opportunity to stay in the field, to make them still feel as a biologist or a chemist or a physicist or mathematician once they're in teaching. So there are a number of components which will all have to be worked out, but it's a number of the things that have been mentioned or have actually been thought of in a very creative way.
One thing that was mentioned earlier that could really help at the presidential provost level, our most successful content programs, our program is math, and it's because we have joint appointments. We have mathematicians who are also educators, and they have a half-time appointment in the College of Education and half-time appointment in the College of Arts and Sciences. You get a much, much better collaborative relationship. It is not a popular way to go with our provost and our presidents, and probably more difficult to find those people, but it is a successful program when that works. So if there can be some incentive to encourage more of that, I think there would be fewer of the kind of problems you just mentioned.
We have a real problem. You all know about this. You may not know the numbers, but when you look at math and you talk about the college readiness curriculum, and where we have the recommended high school program in place, we just aren't producing the math teachers. That's not new. You may not realize that we produce about 800 people statewide math, in some area of math, period. So that's if we could get them all to go into teaching.
We still have a shortage.
So this is in some ways a more dramatic problem than I think the public realizes. But we have to address it if we want to be successful and also keep people in. I know A&M has a study through our ERC in place in terms of how to keep elementary teachers in place who are proficient in math, or at least get that in as well.
Commissioner, if I could raise a question. Jeannie Gerlach sent an email. She couldn't be with us, and it says, I want to especially commend Val Wilkie and the committee for yet again addressing what needs to be done in teacher education. As you all know, these kinds of conversations have been occurring across the country for the last 18 months. Many worthy suggestions have been made, not unlike the ones you are making today. Also, for many years, national and state leaders have been addressing teacher ed needs. For example, in '95, Stan Eichelberry, then president of the American Council of Education, addressed 100 presidents from what he described as top-level institutions, telling them that if they had colleges of education on their campuses, they must make the college as central to the university. He went on to say that if we weren't willing to do that, then they should cut colleges loose. Fortunately, then both Robert Witt and James Spinola, president at UTA, since I have been here, both have focused on the success of the co-ed. That's why we've grown from a center of professional development in '97 to an SOE in 1999 and to a COE in 2003. I have been fortunate to have such leadership. Many do not. My question is, what specific steps will be taken to help many teacher eds programs central to the state and its higher ed entities? We are excellent in identifying what needs to be done. Let's take action and the steps to do that.
Well, I can tell you one of the things we're going to do, that assuming that if we go forward with this incentive funding initiative, one of the things we'll require, if we go to an RFP process, we'll require a strong letter of support from the president. And the proposal will have to be endorsed by the president, and the president will have to commit to seeing that it's actually implemented. We will work through the Council of Chancellors and Presidents to call attention to this issue. At our next board meeting, we're going to call attention to, which is attended by many presidents and chancellors, we'll call attention to the need to improve the productivity of production of teachers in our universities. So we'll do everything the coordinating board can to underscore the importance of this issue, and we'll try to get some momentum going. But we are very much aware at the coordinating board that in order to promote your ability to do your job, we've got to get the involvement of presidents and provosts.
Can I ask you a question, Susan?
Sure.
Is this really limited to to undergraduate? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, sir. Undergraduate, post-BA, and graduate. There are 3 different components. They're scheduled out slightly differently.
That's really good. I mean, let me say that we were identified from some SBAC data as being the #1 producer of math science teachers. And actually, we did an analysis, and in fact, I can pass out the material to you guys, that when I look at what was going on, it's from about 5 different programs, very different kinds of initiatives, running from Accelerate Online, which is a post-bac program, people who have had careers going back, regular post-bac programs, collaborations with the College of Science, I mean, a variety of them, actually, and also our middle school math programs. So, I mean, I'm thinking as long as we've got some level of flexibility in terms of being creative to have high-quality students come into an innovative program, and I think that there's a real shot.
Personally, I feel very strongly that the post-BA pool of people is a very strong, potentially very strong pool of people, and my experience has been that there have not been many funds that have been available for those folks to go back to school, and so that's why we really specifically made a clear post-BA. And there may be programs where you're going into, you've got a kind of MAT model, and so if that works, those folks could also have some funding out of this. And then, as David mentioned, if to keep teachers in the classroom, obviously this is kind of a forgivable piece, i.e. the teach piece. But if they're there 5 years down the road, we have built in a $5,000 incentive to right now the way we've got it written is to help them pay for start an MA program. Now, that's the way it's written right now. We've actually had some discussions on some other ways that incentive could be used, but right now it's that way.
Let me say one thing. I understand that some of you have to leave in about 2 or 3 minutes to catch the flight.
I have one important thing before they leave.
We have some proposed change in terms of program approval. I think most of you would like to hear that. I think you'll think it's good news. And then let's go back to this topic because we'd like everybody to hear that.
Sure.
That's okay.
If you don't mind, you've got at the very back of your packet probably a couple documents that are very familiar to you. The chart, the landscape chart is really the chart that you have seen for a number of years, but I do want to call your attention to Block 1, Item 2, little a, and that changed from the 139 hours to the 120 hours. You're all familiar with the change. Let me, and then you need to go over to the footnote on page 2, and that footnote has now been changed to explain why 139 hours has been replaced by 120 hours because of statute. So that's just that's a cleanup to bring us into compliance with statute. Now here's what I think is the good news that we are considering, and I hope close to some final decision for you. The last document is the form that you're all familiar with, because that's the form that you now submit to us whenever you request a new program. We are considering a process which is not just limited to teacher ed, but because you are the folks who work with this one, we'd like you to know this potential change is coming and get your reaction to it. Instead, the process that the agency is looking at is one where you would verify to us that your program, or your new program, or your change program, is in compliance with the requirements on the chart. The form would be really then a worksheet for you and your faculty as you design programs, because what it does, it implements what's on that chart that's been approved by the coordinating board. And we've not changed it in a number of years. It's in compliance with all kinds of policies. But what you're doing now is completing that form, You're getting it approved through your local process. You're sending it into the coordinating board. And at least for the last several months, if we have some concern about where you've put a course and we can agree with you that that course really just needs to move, then you're getting a letter that says your program's approved with the understanding that this course really belongs over here. That's the one efficiency we put in place recently. But I think this is another potential efficiency that would be very labor saving for you. But you need to tell us if you see limitations or problems with that change, or is it a good change?
The one thing you also know is that, since we're talking about doing this across various other areas, is there's potential at some point for follow-up to make sure you really get what you say you do. Now, we're obviously not going to do that for everyone, so just know that part of this is sort of as the commissioners mentioned, some other efforts of trust and verify. And we believe that we need to where we can appropriately get out of your business, but we'll need to occasionally verify that you're doing what you said you would do. And it's not likely you would see us very often.
I think that would be wonderful. We have 45 areas of certification at Stephen F. Austin, and we went through all of the approvals to reduce down. And through that process, though, interaction with the coordinating board, it's helped us to be better at filling out the forms and placing it. So without that guidance from the coordinating board, I think you would have every program that's out there, a little different variety of where you're going to place the courses, and maybe that's okay.
Well, just because, certainly we can provide technical assistance, guidance. Part of what this would do is allow us to provide a little more leadership in other initiatives. We can certainly provide more technical assistance if we're not going back and forth with your paperwork. But that's our thought.
It's an interesting remark, and it may be the answer to that is if otherwise this is okay to have a workshop once a year for folks, and it could be done online, so people didn't have to come in to help with some of those things, and then have the technical assistance. But I understand your point. If any of you have the same concern, you ought to raise it, if not now, later.
Well, I know that SBEC has provided, with the ASEP system, a lot of workshop support, and that would be helpful. Parallel to that.
We have talked about workshop is certainly a possibility. I think from our perspective, in fact, we are currently working on like a Q&A document. Because there are a lot of folks who don't know the background or where things came from, and so it seems to me that there really needs to be almost. In fact, this notebook is a precious notebook. This notebook goes all the way back to Senate Bill 994 out of 1987. And believe it or not, I had an email request yesterday, someone desperately saying, "Do you know where this came from? Or where did this limitation come from?" And I remember, I was here, guys, and I was able to say, "Oh yeah, that's Senate Bill 994. That was 1987. It's now found in this part of the code." And this person said, "Oh, bless you. They'd been looking 2 hours for it." Well, this is a precious notebook. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to always go buy this notebook, but this notebook tells you, if you're new to this state, where this stuff came from and how we got to that chart. And to me, you don't really change the chart till we know why we got there, and then we understand where we're going forward, and we can go forward. But I think in some ways we need to go back and make some succinct little explanations and help. We can kind of codify a little bit. That'll help you do a better job even locally kind of interpreting this. You don't have to have our help as much. But then if you need our help, we have more time to help you. Does that make sense?
What about the associate's degree? Associate Arts in Teaching.
We are actually having an internal meeting tomorrow to discuss really the early childhood piece of that. I'm assuming that's the question you're...
The reason why is because we now allow 68 hours or more, a little bit more depending on, from a community college, and so that's a majority coming from a community college. And since 80%, this was the statistic, will be feeding through a community college with the accountability system that we have, we need maybe a little bit more balance.
Well, and that's part of that whole discussion. We're starting internally, and I'm not exactly sure where it goes, but we are starting that tomorrow.
Has TEA been involved with this decision making? Because in the past, I mean, we could turn it into the coordinating board and have it approved and then have it questioned in a TEA audit. And so if they're not at the table with you as you make this kind of decision making, we're going to get caught in the middle.
As far as the forum here, or
the way things are placed on the form, the courses meeting, these guidelines. They're just different interpretations,
Sure.
or they have been over the years.
I am meeting with them next Tuesday to basically kind of go through this process. In fact, I had a phone call conference with them today. Their requirements are going to be their requirements, and I'm trying to help them understand that we're dealing with degrees, which is a different piece. And we'll get there. I mean, it may never be perfectly smooth. I'm not promising that, but at least there'll be conversation.
Still going to be two different processes.
Well, but your process from here will be minimal.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do, and I appreciate that.
A brief biographical note for a few of you who may not be familiar with Susan. We're fortunate to get Susan from TEA. Assistant Commissioner, she's also was at Texas State University as an Associate Dean of the School of Ed. She's also been in a Region Service Center. So she's really sat in every spot. So,
just about.
She's going to be a good resource for you. She'll understand where each of you are coming from. But that is an appropriate concern.
Sure. Thanks. That was, if you have concerns about that change, we think it's a good change. The few folks I've floated it by, they seem to think, yes, this would be an efficiency for you, and if you still need help from us, we're there to give it.
So if it's feasible for those of you, say, to get back to the STEM discussion, the other discussion, we would appreciate any feedback or suggestions for other directions. Proposal. I think some people wanted to say something. Oh, I'm sorry.
I've kind of got three comments that have built up over time to try to share with you. They go in a little bit different directions, but I think they all end up in a feedback of one sort or another. One of them is that we talk about recruitment of teachers as if it begins when they graduate from high school. And we're either attracting them or putting barriers or putting enablers as they walk in the door to our colleges and universities. And it seems to me that, just by the way I framed that, you can see where I'm headed with it, that there needs to be something before they ever get to college. Right. One way to look at that is future teacher clubs and things like that. Sure. But you're talking about incentivizing, and maybe incentivizing school systems, public school systems, to try to work with the schools and the colleges and universities to channel the best and the brightest from an earlier age to choosing teaching as a career. How many times have I heard, and perhaps you've heard, teachers that will say to students, oh, you don't want to be a teacher, or I don't want my kids to be a teacher and have the hard life that I've had, rather than talking about the joys of being a teacher and the rewards that we get out of it. We don't need that as a profession. We certainly don't need it now. But if there are ways to work not just with the schools, the colleges and universities, but also with the K-12 schools around trying to provide some kind of incentive to them for working with their own students starting in the 4th and 5th grade, which is where we know that some of the decisions around math and science begin in terms of dropout. Began working with them to try to encourage them to move into the teaching profession. That's one set of thoughts. A second set of thoughts is that as long as I've been in leadership roles, and I go back to about 1987, because my first time in Texas was, I came with Carl Perkins, it seems like, walked in the door and said, welcome to Texas, you now have only 18 hours to prepare teachers. But in all that period of time, there have been numerous reports that have said one of the things that needs to happen in universities is that presidents and provosts must take the lead in teacher preparation and look at this as institution-wide. And looking at 22 years of this experience, I can say it hadn't worked yet. And so what is there to lead us to believe now that whatever we're going to try now is going to work? Presidents and provosts have a particular agenda that they move to, which is where it should be. It's kind of a higher level one, and they clearly need to set the tone. But they're not at the working level of where those things happen. The working level of where those things happen, I think, is at the dean's levels. And where I've had the most success is finding a colleague dean of particularly arts and science who I can sit down with and I can get them on the same page as I am around the importance of teacher preparation. Now, in the early to mid-90s, the U.S. Department of Education began holding meetings that brought presidents or provosts, deans of education, and deans of arts and science together to talk about their moral or ethical obligation to work together in preparing teachers. And in my experience, it worked in lots of cases. It clearly worked in the case of UT Arlington. We heard Jeannie's testimony about that. It seems to me that one other avenue for the potential use of those funds is to organize sessions of bringing these decision makers in colleges and universities together to show them why this is important and how it can work when we work together. A third point is, and I don't know the exact statistics, so I'm likely to skew it because of where my head's coming from, but it seems to me that we probably need enough physics teachers in Texas high schools alone to absorb all of the physics high school teachers being prepared in the United States, period, the entire country, I would bet. So far, we're responding to that challenge by saying, one more time, let's prepare more teachers. So the solution is keep as our assumption a square box with one teacher and 40 kids. And that's our model of American education. And then try to get more teachers to get in those boxes. Maybe we ought to challenge that assumption and say maybe there's other ways to organize the teaching profession and how we work with kids. We've talked about career paths for teachers for as many years as I can think of. And talking about maybe there are senior teachers and junior teachers and lesser teachers, and some that do one kind of responsibility and some do other kinds of responsibilities, where maybe you have only 2 physics teachers that are physics teachers, and they work with some other science teachers that don't do physics necessarily, but are reasonably well educated with science, that work with the physics teachers to work with a larger number of students as a team. That's not a brand new idea. That one's been around for quite a while too. But the point is, it's thinking about how we go about it differently than the way we've been doing it for 200 years. And trying to say, is that a way, and certainly the colleges and universities can play a definite role in that, in looking at the differentiation of science teaching roles. By the way, I have one sort of parting comment. We talked about the difficulty of science and math teachers. My experience has been the math faculty get it. And they're the only ones that do get it. I have yet to find a chair of a math department who doesn't understand that preparing high school math teachers is the key to their future. But I'll be damned if I can find a physics teacher, a chemistry chair, or a biology chair who gets it. And so I think we need to reinforce those math department chairs and parts of our arts and sciences. But we got to find a way to work with the science side. Anyway, so much for my tirade.
That's good.
Thank you for good
Thank you.
ideas.
Be careful. Thank you.
But this really complicates things, but I don't see any of this working unless we do the partnership. The whole incentive program for what we do at the university is on the input side, and then they go into schools. They go into high-need schools. Do we know what's going to happen to them when they're there? I mean, our serious discussion about the Teach scholarships is do these students know what they're obligating themselves to if they say, this is an impossible situation, I want out? That's the dire statement. But the important thing is, so what it might lead to is these programs have to be done between those who prepare teachers and those who employ the teachers. So what about pilots that then required the schools to say, we're going to do a wraparound here. We're going to make sure the principal is engaged in, more the life of those teachers once they arrive and how they're doing, and the university is going to have to be partner to that. The same thing with doing physics differently. I mean, Susan Sclafani in HISD probably would have had advanced undergraduate majors in science working in the Houston Independent School District if she hadn't gone to Washington, D.C. We had started that conversation. The point is, it's HISD that makes that happen.
Sure.
We can support it. So back to the point, can any of this happen if we only treat the inputs and we don't talk about what happens afterward? And might we want to design some of the incentive programs to require a real schools-university partnership in it?
That's absolutely one of the. I didn't go through every element of the requirements that we have because there are numerous, but that would be something like that commitment would be part of the proposal.
It's interesting, but there's another connection. We have a group of folks from the high-tech industry in Texas meeting with some deans of engineering and some chancellors. And one thing that the vice president from the UT Health Science Center brought up was the need to have more collaborative programs between the schools, even the health science centers, and industry to really get those people into industry. So it's really a similar situation in people in similar disciplines. And so we may need to think about how we can tie part of that into it as well, because that group, I think, is willing to put dollars on the table as well.
I wanted to go back to the middle school math piece, and I think Doug mentioned the preparing middle school math teachers. That's becoming a very popular area for us, and while it isn't secondary teachers, I wonder if it isn't kind of a staging area where they first get certified and become middle school teachers, try out teaching math, but then if there were a way then to move them on to teaching in secondary schools once they have a little bit of experience. And it may not be tied to this initiative at all, but I wonder about that population because, again, we are much more able to recruit students into middle school math. Sure. They're comfortable with that. Sure. But a little more cautious about secondary math. Is anybody else having that?
That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. Sure. Massive.
So that might be just an untapped pool that we could grow and just continue to grow the middle school too. I mean, not that that's one solution. I think, again, what Doug said is we need lots of paths, lots of programs.
Jill, in terms of what you're saying there in the middle school math, I know that our math department says we don't want this person who has a degree in mathematics being less well-trained than any other individual that we have that has a degree in mathematics. And I think that a different kind of training may be necessary for the high school math teacher. Right now, they would not want to put their imprimatur on a math degree that wasn't a math degree. And so there may be some need for us to develop interdisciplinary degrees and take a different approach in terms of the total preparation. There may be what is it that the high school math teacher needs in the eyes of the math department to do a successful job.
A classic example of that is the Math Ed certification that we're doing now for Master Mathematics certification people, and we have 18 hours that have been approved in MAED, Math Education, that are graduate level, that prepare those teachers then to be master teachers of mathematics. So that might be a model we need to capitalize on a little more in this area.
I think the other thing, too, is the competencies that you have in teacher ed. Right. A lot of the math departments, they create these courses but haven't looked at the competencies that students have to demonstrate in their teaching. And if that drives what courses you create so that students are skilled in that content, then you have a prepared math educator to enter the secondary field, and not the plethora of courses that a math department would want you to have if you were going into business and industry. So you're right, it's depending on who you're preparing. I don't want you all to slip away without hearing what is happening, a major initiative that Dr. Barnes has in our area with Araceli, and I don't know if she's even there.
She's here.
She is. There you are. Because we've already had one part of this initiative move forth, and we have, since you as deans are here, if we could allow her to mention what is happening over the next 3 meetings that will be taking place with some of the universities. And at the same time, in our closing, I know the commissioner would like to have the opportunity, we would as a division, Dr. Barnes, since this is her charge, to be able to meet with you maybe twice a year, especially as we move forth, to be able to do things to help you all as deans, since we are on the higher ed side of the house. So, Araceli, let me let you take
Yes,
it.
thank you. And I will only take 1.5 minutes of your time. I'll draw your attention to the handout, and that you can take with you, so that outlines basically, you'll find it in the middle, and it talks about the College Readiness Initiative Faculty Collaboratives. The first couple of slides you might be familiar with, but we just wanted to clarify some of the work that we're doing within educator quality. The P16 initiative on the first slide there at the bottom talks about the types of goals that we align all of our work towards closing the gaps. We do work in 3 different areas: in the college readiness initiatives, in the educator quality, and in P16 outreach. We're trying to bring quite a systemic approach to the work that we do, looking and leveraging the different types of efforts that are happening, not only within our group, but within the throughout the coordinating board. On the next slide, we talk a little bit more about educator quality, but I'll mention at the bottom, we, and not just those of us that are here now, but many that have come before us to organize these programs, we are managing these math, science, technology teacher preparation academies, and now there are 5 of you that are participating in these, and we're very excited because we're learning a lot from those small pilots, if you will, where we do have partnerships with the school districts, where we are focusing on students in the high needs areas, where we are trying to provide incentive to both the students as well as the institution. So we're working with these 5 institutions now, and we hope to gain approval in January to offer additional types of support so that you can participate. And here we have a small collaborative now that is working on specifically the math, science, technology area. On the next slide, I want to mention for those of you that have participated, actually just about everyone here has participated through representatives from your institution, and we were just so proud to be able to host or to launch the first symposium for this idea of how do we have this collaboration between the schools of education, the schools of arts and sciences, as well as focusing on these college and career readiness standards, so that we are linking to how we contribute to helping the students in the classroom. So that is the idea behind these symposia that we have been hosting, and we've been hosting with our partners. Texas State University did a wonderful job helping us with the Math Collaborative that took place in November. You can see that on the next page. The following one is on January 23rd, and the invitations have gone out. There's a website that's in common for everybody. We are inviting and did receive in the first symposia participants from the math faculty, as well as participants from the schools of education. And as you said, maybe that was the special uniqueness of that area, but they worked great together, and we were really just motivated that this is the way to go, to drive these into the institutions, but through these partnerships. So I encourage you to participate as you might through your representatives at the English Language Arts Institute, which will take place in Austin on January 23rd. And then you see we have the Science Symposia hosted by Dr. Guffey there at Texas A&M Corpus on February 28th. And then Dean Gerlach, who sent in that note, is sponsoring the UT Arlington event on April 3rd. And then that takes us to, this is just step 1, then that takes us to a continued collaborative, which you may know received a fair amount of funding to promulgate these kinds of discussions, putting people together, helping them develop. If you can see that little model there on page 3, to help them develop these 4 main things: the sharing of new information, the development of research and new products that can help us to accomplish these goals, and then professional development and a sustainable community. So that's basically what I wanted to just thank you for helping support so far, and to keep involved and give us any more new ideas for how to make this happen.
We had over 200 faculty at the math symposia that we hosted with, 54, was it 54 universities?
I thought it was 51, but it's over 50 different universities participated,
which was excellent.
Mathematics, and they stayed till 3:30 on Friday.
It's like going to school.
It was.
There was one more individual who sent in a question, and I need to pose this to you. The question comes from Mr. James Clark, and is, what university colleges offer or require art courses, art, music, or theater for the elementary generalist, or do you have it infused in one of your curriculum courses?
Oh, we have it.
Required. So of you, there's probably about 9 of you.
Most have a separate course.
It's most everybody sitting at the table. Thank you. It's required.
We promised we'd let you out of here by 4:30. If you have any ideas about how we can tweak, improve our incentive funding proposal for teacher preparation, please let us know. Feel free to send your ideas to Susan, to David, to me. We will take them seriously into account. I think we have a good shot of actually implementing this incentive funding proposal. But tell us about ideas that you have about how we can make sure that your presidents and your provosts support the idea of training more teachers, secondary school teachers, in these critical areas. I support the idea of reaching students earlier. One of the best programs I ever saw to get more students of color to go into the biological sciences was a program that the University of California at Irvine did in the Santa Ana School District. And they were giving kids lab coats in the first grade. And they had, and as it turns out, by developing this program in Santa Ana and then some other school districts, the University of California at Irvine prepares or graduates more majors in the biological sciences than any research university in the country. So that kind of pipeline approach can work. So whatever ideas you have, please let us know. The key message I hope you will take away with you is that we are very committed to doing whatever we can at the coordinating board to increase the production of math and science high school teachers of very high quality, and we want to work with you to do this. We thought we would start with deans of schools and colleges of education. We know we have to involve deans of natural sciences, of physical sciences, of arts and science, and we will do that. But we wanted to start off, we wanted to feel you out about how you felt about this incentive funding program. This is something we really want to help you with and work with you effectively on. It is not too much to say that the future of Texas depends on this. So thank you very much. Any closing comments or?
Yes, Mr. Clark, I will respond to your last question that is on your email for you.
One other thing, our board meets quarterly, and at our January board meeting, the major policy issue will be about the importance of producing teachers. So if we encourage you, if you're able to come. If not, you'll be able to watch it on the web. We'll be interested in your feedback.
And the day before our board meeting, there's always a meeting of the Council of Chancellors and Presidents, and I always make a report to that body about what's going on at the coordinating board. And I promise you I will talk about the importance of producing more teachers. So we're going to push aggressively on this issue, and we need your help.
And their director is at the back of the room nodding her head.
One of the things that I think made the Regents Initiative successful back when Bill Reed was involved in it was the fact that they took it to the Chancellor, and the Chancellor took it to the Presidents, and the Presidents, maybe I can say, thought maybe they had a chance to participate and not participate, but when they found out they didn't have the option, we got a lot of support.
And the next time we meet with regents, we'll take the message to them as well. We know that this is a long-term initiative.
Well, thank you for your support of education.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays to all of you, and thank you again.
Yeah, Mary Comerford. Great.
Talk to some of the various people.
Thank you.
Just a nice place. I'll Thank you.
So it's about a 5-hour trip.
Yeah, it'll be a 5-hour trip. How are you? Good to see you. How are you? Good to see you. Hey, how are you? Don't tell me you're driving back.
New enough,
Don't you have uniforms here?
Yeah, a lot.
Yes, I do.
That just happened. That's what we're learning. We'll do something. Well, we're wondering if there's a way to make y'all already meet. I don't know whether it's your certification people who need to meet. If they're already meeting.
There's some coffee in the back of the room if you want to get a cup before you go.
That's one thing we were thinking about. Even. They said it pretty strong because we've been waiting for them to sign this. Enjoy your family a lot. I'm the Associate Dean for Teacher Education. It's great to meet you too. Yes, I think we have. Anyway, sure. I think it's going to go well. It needs to be great. Yes.
That's up. You got your work cut out for you.
Oh, as always.
Why do you the whole idea is this is sort of what these are culturation of the schools and what you apply in our school. That's what's This has been around a long time. His time, he got into a lot of political trouble. The school to save his money and something else. I didn't know if that partnership fits in with
Sure. I think, yeah, it's very
I can send you a copy.
I came for a lot of reasons, but one of them was because the neighbors and the neighbor asked for a president.
That's right. How do you scale that?
And you know this
communities,
right? Yes.
Okay. So this, and so
there are a lot of people
themselves would potentially be looked upon as role models. Like